Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for Gotham, Season 1, Episode 6, Spirit of the Goat. And this episode was amazing. I loved it, and I was surprised by what they did in this episode, because not only did they fix everything I said that was wrong with the show, but this episode had probably the hugest cliffhanger of the show so far. The ending was so huge in this episode. I loved everything that was going on in it. I love this episode. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I was into this episode the entire time. There was nothing in this episode that seemed, boring to me or anything. Everything really was great. And also, this was an episode that really used the underused characters very well. First of all, Harvey, for example. I was not digging Harvey's character. Like, I haven't really been liking his character. He's actually been one of my least favorite parts about the show. However, after this episode, I really enjoyed his character because this episode focused more on Harvey's past and why Harvey is the way he is, why he's so protective of Jim and things like that. And I thought that was definitely very interesting the way they did that. They tied the case and gave us a backstory, and that was genius what they did there. So let's just get this episode because overall I loved it. So a man is looking into a mirror and he declares himself the Spirit of the Goat, and he dons a leather mask and smashes the mirror. He later abducts a woman, Shelley Lawson, from her apartment, and Harvey and his partner then, his name is Dix, track down the van registered to Randall Milky. They find it at an old abandoned opera house, and Dix calls for backup, and Harvey wants to go inside immediately, but Dix reminds his partner that Randall is basically insane. He's insane and everything, so he's telling them that they should wait, and despite that, he refuses to let Randall kill Shelley and charges inside. And Dix reluctantly goes inside with them. They find Shelley unconscious and strung up on a scaffold. Like, that was really hard to watch. Harvey realizes that the candles around Shelley's body are barely lit, meaning Randall is still out there, and the partners split up to search beneath the scaffold, ordering Randall to come out. And Randall comes out saying that Randall's gone, and only the Spirit of the Goat remains. So he pulls a lever, dropping Dix beneath the scaffold, charges at Harvey. Randall boasts that he will always come back. Harvey grabs his gun, shoots Randall repeatedly, rips off the mask, and confirms that it's Randall, and then goes to where Dix is laying. And basically, he was shot, and that shows right away why Harvey is so protective of Jim. And the reason he's so protective is because his partner almost died, and that's why Harvey is not as violent as Jim is, or, I definitely enjoy that, so I thought that was definitely really well done. So then we get to the present, and Harvey's at a crime scene where another woman has just been strung up, exactly like Shelley was 10 years ago. And Edward is there. Now, Ed, in this episode, Edward has not had a lot to do in this show. Like, he's pretty much just been a character who helps them solve the case for one scene, and then he goes off and does, his own thing. However, this episode, they use, Edward in a very good way, in my opinion. I thought the way they used him was very good. I really liked the way they used him in this episode, and I was definitely a fan of that. So, Harvey's telling them they need to focus on the time of the death, and the victim is Amanda Hastings, who was a 21-year-old and comes from a family. And Harvey says that the goat always kills the firstborn and figures that they have a copycat. They have a new Spirit of the Goat because he's always thought of what that Spirit of the Goat said to him, that, they're always going to come back. So, basically, the detective is wondering where Jim is, and Edward reminds him that, said that he's not answering his phone, and we find out where he is. Jim is with Barbra. He's arguing about how he has no choice but to keep some secrets. She insists that she still wants to help him. She still wants to help him. She wants to be there for him with his burden. And just like he helped her with her own burden, because, he helped her with that. So, Jim's wondering if they're still fighting, and Barbra says that they're negotiating terms and asks him to let her in. And the phone rings, and Jim says that he'll tell her everything, and he can make it right. They kiss, and then Jim leaves, and he goes off to Harvey, basically. And I thought that was definitely a really good scene, definitely really intense, because as we know, Barbra doesn't 100% trust Jim right now. She thinks he's hiding something. She doesn't really trust him, especially because of the whole Oswald thing. After that, she really does not trust him. So, she really doesn't trust him at this point, and it's very interesting to see what's going to happen there. So I thought that was definitely a really interesting scene. Then we see Renee and Crispus. They are canvassing the docks, looking for someone who saw Jim kill Oswald. They're still pursuing this. They still think that Jim killed Oswald, and they find a sailor on disability who identifies Jim as a shooter, and Renee figures out that they got him. So I thought that was definitely a really good scene. And one of the things I definitely really enjoyed about this episode in particular was that while we did have this case, that was not the main thing this episode. The main plot of this episode was really Jim trying to, basically keep this lie of Oswald being dead. He made that alliance with Oswald that he wouldn't tell anyone, and basically we're seeing that it's already starting to come crashing down for him. So Jim ends up meeting Harvey at the crime scene. Harvey wonders why he was late, and he figures out that the bad publicity is going to come down on the GCPD. And Jim says that they should catch him quick, and Harvey suggests they talk to the Hastings family, figuring that Amanda knew her killer, and tells Edward to call him when they perform the autopsy. And, basically, as I said, I forgot to say with Edward, he is hilarious, really. I loved that they had a lot more to do with Edward, especially in next, something else they did with him, which I was very surprised about. So they go to Amanda's home, and, basically they go to her parents, and we see Robert Hastings, who is her father. Basically, he explains that he's been having dreams for a week of a dark, overbearing presence, and he insists that everyone loved Amanda, and Harvey notices that he's clenching his hands. And the family therapist, Dr. Marks, who is a new character, escorts both parents out and says that the Hastings might not be ready to face questioning. Now, she's kind of hiding it at this point. And I thought she was basically just hiding it because they don't want to. Obviously, they just saw their daughter die, so they don't really want it at this point. It makes sense, definitely, because, they saw their daughter die. It's hard for them to answer questions about it. So, Harvey doesn't really think anything of it at this point. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because what ends up happening with her character, which I thought was definitely very interesting. I personally thought that we were actually going to have a new recurring character. I don't know why, but I felt like Marks was going to be a new recurring character, in my opinion. So Marks says that Robert isn't capable of dealing with a tragedy, and Harvey says that no one is. And then we get a very interesting scene. I was not expecting this, and I thought this was very, very funny. And I love the way they're incorporating humor onto the show. I mean, the way they were doing it before felt very forced. I was not as much as a fan of it. I wasn't really into it, but that's because I wasn't into the show at all very much. And now that I am into the show, it's adding something to the show, which I definitely really enjoyed. So Edward goes to the record annex, and yes, he does have his own scene. He's not just there to be, the guy that gives answers to, the guy that gives some clues about the murder to Harvey and Jim. He's not just there for that in this episode. He actually has a plot. He ends up greeting the clerk, Kristen Kringle, who right away, he's making fun of her name. He's joking about how he would love to have her parents, which I thought was definitely really funny. Like, he's definitely being very creepy. He asks for records on the goat killings from a decade ago, blurts out he would like her parents because they must have a sense of humor, because her last name is Kringle, of course, and, Kristen Kringle, Chris Kringle, get it? So, she's very creeped out by this, obviously. I mean, if some guy randomly came up to a girl and was like, can I, can I have your parents? Like, that'd be extremely weird. I mean, no one says, can I have your parents? Like, that was really weird what he said. And Edward offers to help her, and I am wondering something about Edward. Do his parents not really support him? I feel like the reason he said that is because his parents do not support him. They don't like his sense of humor. They think that it's childish. They think he's stupid himself. They don't like him. He doesn't have a good relationship with his parents, and I feel like the reason why he asked that, even though it is funny and was portrayed in a very funny way, I feel that maybe Edward does not have the best relationship with his parents. What I do like is that we are starting to see more of him. However, I would like to see more of his daughter, Poison Ivy. I definitely would, because she is on the poster, which means that she is an essential part of the show, and we haven't seen really any of her. We saw one scene of her in the first episode, and after that, we haven't seen her. So I do hope that we see more with his daughter, definitely, because we do know that Poison Ivy is his daughter. And we do know that this guy is going to become the Riddler. We know this. So the way they're setting that up is perfect, definitely. And it's not being thrown in our faces as much as now they're just giving us clues to why they became this specific vigilante. And I'm looking forward to seeing that, definitely. I actually feel like Edward is going to take the longest to turn into a villain. Here's the thing, he doesn't seem like villainous very much at all right now. The one person that seems the most villainous right now is Oswald and Fish. Those are the only two people that feel the most villainous to me. And Edward really doesn't. He just seems like a guy who, is very funny, but no one else really thinks he's funny, and, it's coming across in definitely a funny way, but I definitely feel that they're going to show more of that, and I hope they do, because I like this storyline of him basically thinking that he's funny, but no one else thinks he's funny. So I think that definitely is very interesting. So, looking around the Hastings home, Harvey says that the goat abducted his victims from their homes, and the original goat, Randall, has the keys. And Jim calls to get the names of the companies that have access to the building and tells Harvey that they're ready for the autopsy. So Oswald then goes to see his mother Gertrude, who I love the girl that played his mother in this episode. I don't know her name, but she did a great job, definitely. I thought she was just so funny, and Oswald even had some funny stuff in this episode, which I really liked. I like this episode was more of not really funny, but there was a lot of funny stuff in this episode, which I definitely really enjoyed. He tells his mother that all he wanted was some respect and that they hurt him. Basically, he complains that he hasn't called her because he's dating some woman, and of course, he says, look, I haven't dated anyone. Now, some people are sort of suspecting this, and I kind of suspected too. Some people are suspecting that Oswald is going to turn out to be gay, and that's why he might end up turning into a vigilante, possibly. Now, it makes sense. Oswald is so full of rage, and basically, we find out why Oswald's so full of rage. We actually get some clues to why Oswald is such a violent person. Basically, this is because there are these bullies, basically, and they beat him up because they resented him. And Oswald takes her hand and promises that he will be someone in Gotham. And that really makes me think that Oswald is gay, definitely, because maybe they were teasing him, maybe calling him a fag, things like that, which I would never say that word, but, I'm just saying maybe they said that to him. It very well could be possible. I'm not going to, confirm anything right now because it's too early in the show. However, I am going to say that I do think that he could possibly end up being gay. He could end up being gay. He might not be right now, but I do feel like in the future he's probably going to end up being gay, which I thought is definitely something that's very interesting. And I'm looking forward to definitely seeing what's going to happen there. That definitely is really interesting. So the medical examiner then tells the detectives that Amanda was knocked out with chloroform, and Harvey tells the examiner to look at the base of the skull for an incision sewn closed, and the man finds it, and there's an object inside, and it's a 1930 Liberty penny, and Harvey says that it was Randall's M.O., and no one would know that detail because they never released the information. So Jim and Harvey meet with Essen, and Harvey explains that Randall sewed a similar coin into the hands of each of his victims, and he insists that Randall didn't tell anyone that they left it out of the file, and the medical examiner, Ed Hayes, knew, but he died of cirrhosis, which, of course, cirrhosis is making me think of American Horror Story right now, because, of course, Ethel is suffering from cirrhosis, and that makes me think of American Horror Story. A lot of things make me think of American Horror Story. It's my favorite show on TV. What do you expect? But that has nothing to do with this. I'm just saying. Essen points out that Dix might know something, and Harvey reluctantly goes to see his old partner. And I thought this was great that they decided to see Dix, because I personally thought that Dix died. I really felt like he did, and I felt like, we saw him go up in an ambulance, but that confirms that Dix is alive, which I think is definitely very interesting to see what's going to happen there. And I kind of now have a prediction about something that I'm not going to talk about yet, because it didn't happen yet, but we then see Bruce and Alfred, who don't have as much to do in this episode, and at the manor, they're watching a newscast about the new goat killer, and Alfred points out that Bruce is a potential target as a firstborn son of the rich and powerful, and suggests that they leave town. Now, Bruce is refusing about this, saying that he has work to do and that the goat wouldn't take him because there's no one to take him from. So, I thought that was a very interesting thing that he said. So, Kristen then returns and discovers that Nigma has resorted her system, and she's furious that he upsets her system, and Edward assures her that he wants her to keep her job, and he finally realizes that he might have done something inappropriate and makes a hasty exit. So definitely he can tell that this girl wants nothing to do with him. I do feel that he does have feelings for her, but at this point she wants nothing to do with him, and I feel like maybe now his plot is going to try to be to get into a relationship with her, but try to do it in a way where she's not freaked out. So I think that's what's going to happen there. So Harvey and Jim go to the hospital where Dix is staying, and this was a great scene because we finally see Dix in the present, and Jim says that he doesn't want to talk about what happened to his partner. He tells Jim to wait outside, but Jim reminds him that they're there on both the same case, and goes into the rec room with his partner, and we see this wheelchair-bound Dix. Dix is in a wheelchair now. He greets him over and makes it clear that he blames Harvey for his injuries. And Harvey introduces Jim and asks if Dix ever told anyone about the pennies. And Dix insists that he didn't tell anyone and figures that Randall wasn't working alone like they thought. And Harvey storms out and Dix warns Jim that Harvey is a loose cannon. Now, I thought this was a very interesting scene. Harvey's a loose cannon who thinks that he is a hero, which definitely does make sense because Harvey's had a ton of meltdowns over a lot of things, in these past few episodes. And that doesn't make sense why he said that. And Jim goes out after his partner and finds Harvey paying Dix's bills. Now, what's interesting is that that's actually foreshadowing something that's a little bit later into the episode, which we will talk about. But We then see this girl, Ember Cobley. She is packing for a boat trip, and she goes upstairs, and when the maid and Anita comes back, a man wearing the goat mask grabs her from behind and chloroforms her. A minute later, Ember comes back, and the goat chloroforms her as well, which was really intense. So, Ember, however, doesn't show up at the marina. Her parents call the police, and Harvey takes the team to the Copley house and calls Jim, and there's no sign of a break-in, supporting Jim's theory that the killer had keys. So Harvey warns Jim that the original goat took 8 hours to abduct and kill his victims, and figures that they would have only had that long to save Ember, and Jim figures that their guy has been busy and would have called in a sick the last couple of days, and Harvey tells his partner to bring Edward in. Now, I thought that was definitely very interesting. So then we get a scene that I personally really enjoy. I was very happy they brought this plot back because I really enjoyed where this plot was going, and I was looking forward to seeing where they were going to continue with it. Now, they didn't talk about it at all last week, but they finally talked about it again, which I was very happy they did, because I'm very fond of this, definitely. I think it's one of the best parts of the show. Barbra approaches Renee out of the station so that she'll tell her whatever she can find out. However, she wants her ex-lover to keep an open mind. Renee says that who and what Jim knows will get her killed, and says that they're getting a warrant for Jim's arrest. Now, as we know, again, Barbra doesn't trust Jim. We know this for a fact, and she advises Barbra to get him out of Gotham until it's over, and to not come to her again. Because Renee pretty much thinks that Jim killed, Oswald. She pretty much thinks this. So, she's basically telling Barbra, don't believe a thing you hear about Jim, and I definitely feel like her and Barbra are going to team up. I definitely feel like that's going to happen. At this point, they're against each other, but Barbra does not trust Jim and thinks he's so sketchy that I do feel that they're eventually going to team up, in my opinion. I just feel that's going to happen. Because we know that, obviously, there's no mention of Barbra in the comics, I believe, in Batman. I don't believe there's a mention of her in the comics, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to her. So Harvey gets back to the station, and Jim and Edward are telling him that they've narrowed the suspects down to one man, Raymond Earl. And Jim says that Raymond has been squatting at the address in Canary Park, and Harvey recognized the address and says that he's sure Raymond is their man. So they drive to the old opera house where they got Randall 10 years ago, and you see that opera house again. I thought this scene was very well done. And inside the building, Raymond's preparing to sacrifice Amber on the same scaffold as her predecessor. And Jim and Harvey come in. The killer ducks into the shadows, and they see Amber atop the scaffold and spots Raymond on the balcony above. Harvey goes after him while Jim frees Amber. Harvey gets upstairs. Raymond attacks him as a two-man struggle, and they get into a big fight here. Raymond shoves Harvey down a flight of stairs so that he will always come back, and Harvey tackles him. Jim arrives and knocks Raymond out, and Harvey admits that his partner did good. So it seems like at this point they've caught the suspect. It seems like they've caught the guy, and I thought this was interesting. I'm like, did they seriously just catch him already? Because we're only like 45, there's like 15 minutes left, and I'm like, they already catched him? That was surprising, because I was thinking now it's going to be basically pure storytelling now. So at Wayne Manor, I thought this was a very interesting scene. Selina breaks into the study. You know, Kat, Selina, whatever you want to call her. She breaks into the study, and she finds Bruce sleeping on a couch. She slips past him and finds his board with clippings of all the people in Gotham with ties to his parents' deaths. And on the desk is a box, and she picks it up and then studies Bruce again. And Alfred slips out the window as she hears Alfred approaching. And this is setting up perfectly for what's going to end up happening between them. Because as we know, Selina slash Kat is an anti-hero. She's not a bad person by any means. She's not a villain. She is someone who's going to end up working with Bruce, and, you know, they're going to have that relationship and everything. And this is setting it up perfectly because, you know, she's, trying to find out more about him. And I'm definitely interested in seeing what exactly she's trying to find out about him. You know, basically, she wants to help with this death. She's helping, Jim out, and it's going to connect perfectly to what's eventually going to happen, which is eventually going to lead to a confrontation between the two, which I'm definitely looking forward to. And I definitely think is going to be one of the highlights of the season by far. I don't know when that's coming up, but this scene definitely shows that the story's starting to progress, which I really liked. Because we haven't seen too much of it, actually, That's been a big thing in the show, that they talked about the storyline like it was a huge thing. We haven't seen it since, like, episode 3. Really, we didn't see any progression with it since episode 3. And now we're starting to see some progression with it, which I really liked. So, Oswald saying about at his mother's apartment. She comes in with his clean suit and asks if he's doing anything illegal. He lied and says it's just business, and Gertrude tells him that he can trust no one but his mother, and Oswald said he's just found a policeman that he can trust. He's sure that his friend will help him come out in the end, And basically, he thinks he can trust Jim at this point. He thinks that Jim has his back and everything. And, I thought that was definitely really good because it shows that he does trust Jim at this point. So Jim and Harvey tell Essen that Raymond works with an agency that serviced the billings of both victims. Raymond isn't talking, but Essen figures out they've got the killer. And once she leaves, Harvey points out that Randall and Raymond have never met, but they both decide to become the GOAT, and he wonders if something found and changed them, and figures that they're missing something. So Jim is ready to go back to work looking for a connection, but Harvey tells him to get some rest and they'll start in the morning. So in the interrogation room, Raymond suddenly starts muttering no. He's just like, no. I'm like, why is he saying no to himself? He's clenching his fist, and Harvey's watching, and he realizes that something is definitely wrong here. So, because, he's clenching his fist. And Jim comes home, and Barbra tells him that Renee has a witness. He insists he didn't kill, and I thought the scene was amazing. He insists he didn't kill Oswald. Barbra asks what he isn't telling her. She begs Jim to come with her. Just as there's a knock on the door, Jim tells his fiancé he can't run, answers the door, and basically they're there. There's Crispus and Renee, basically going to put him under arrest for Oswald's murder, and they read him his rights, and they take him away. And I thought that was very surprising. I wasn't expecting that. And I love where that went. I thought that was great. So, Harvey goes back to the Hastings house, and Mark's having a therapy session with Robert. And basically, I thought this was very interesting because Harvey points out that Robert was clenching his fist, and that hypnotists can reduce the compulsion by having them clench at their fist. And Marks agrees, and Harvey asks what Raymond and Randall both, basically he's talking to her like he's just randomly talking to her, like having a general conversation. And he figures that Marks hypnotized both of them into believing that they were the spirit of the GOAT. And that was an awesome twist, in my opinion. I love what they did with her character. And basically, she hypnotized both of them, and that's how they've never met. Because as we know, they've never met. So, of course, basically, she was the one that started this whole Spirit of the Goat thing, which I think is an amazing twist, and I definitely thought that was fantastic. I love that. So, then we see the very last scene in the episode. Robert comes out and asks if everything is okay. Harvey puts Marks under arrest. She gives Robert a post-hypnotic suggestion to kill Harvey, and the older men tackle the detective. Marks heads for the door, but Harvey knocks Robert out and then shoots Marks in the leg. So, that's not over. That whole thing is not over yet, which I'm definitely interested in seeing what's going to happen there, because here's the thing. They didn't finish the case. Marks is not dead. The detective, the police did not come and arrest her, so there's going to be more there, definitely, which I'm looking forward to. So then we get the very last scene in the episode, which I thought was probably the best scene in Gotham so far, in my opinion. Because Harvey's basically telling Essen what happened, and Renee and Crispus bring Jim in. And they tell Essen that they're taking him into custody, and, Jim is insisting he didn't shoot Oswald, and tells Harvey that he, basically Harvey's like, oh, no, he didn't do it. But then Jim admits to him the truth, that he didn't shoot Oswald. And then we get probably the most awesome scene in the show so far, because just as this happens, Harvey's completely confused. He's like, what are you talking about? You told me you clearly killed him. So Essen objects, things turn to look violent, and Oswald comes in, he says, I am Oswald Cobblepot, and everyone stares at him, and, Harvey is just pissed that Jim lied to him. He lunges at his partner, and there's definitely going to be a lot of friction between them in the next episode. And it looks like in the next episode, there's not going to be any procedural stuff. Looks like it's going to be clearly just storytelling, which I loved about this episode. I love this episode. They finally progressed a lot of storylines. I love this episode finally showed a lot more progression towards some of the storylines that I was really looking forward to. And now I think that definitely the thing that Dick said makes a lot of sense, because now Harvey is pissed at Jim, and he's, as Mark's, Dick says, he is a loose cannon. So I definitely feel there's going to be a fight between them, and definitely a lot of tension between them, which I'm personally really looking forward to. I think it's going to be really cool. Now, as far as Barbra goes, Barbra has no idea what's going on here. She's going to be completely confused. Barbra, I definitely think, is going to team up with Renee at some point, just because I don't feel she trusts him, and I feel like Renee is going to try to convince her, because Renee and Barbra, they do still have chemistry. They do like each other, and, they did date, so I do feel like she's going to be able to get her to basically agree with her. I think there's going to be a way for that to happen. Now, Marks, that whole thing is not closed. I don't think it is, at least. So we'll have to see what happens there. I personally don't think that thing is closed. I think there is going to be more of that, and I definitely really enjoyed that. I really like what they're doing with Edward's character. Am I the only am I the only one that feel like Edward's probably going to become, like, my favorite character? Just because of the way this episode was going with his character, I love the twist of basically that he's trying to make everyone laugh, but no one really finds him funny. I do feel like he's trying to win Kristen over, and maybe he's going to try to approach her differently. I do feel he's trying to win her over, but maybe he's going to approach her differently. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. And I do feel that, she is eventually going to like him, but at this point she doesn't like him just because he's not funny. Selina, I love seeing Selina, and, you know, her looking at files for Bruce. Definitely that's going to lead to a confrontation between them. I don't know in the next episode, but, soon that's going to happen, which I'm looking forward to, definitely. Um, there was an and, also, as far as Oswald, do you think that Oswald was severely bullied because maybe he was homosexual or, you know, gay or, you know, he was gay? A lot of people are talking about that. I think it's definitely very interesting and definitely a possibility, but I personally don't know. But that's basically my review. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I personally thought this was an amazing episode. By far, best episode of the season. I love finding out more about Harvey. I love finding out, you know, that Harvey is full of rage and, you know, he is very, he's a loose cannon. I love that quote, basically. I also feel that if Jim does end up going in... Oh, but also, I forgot to say, Harvey is under arrest now. So Harvey's under arrest, and I'm like, why is Harvey under arrest? So if Harvey ends up getting arrested, maybe Jim's going to end up working with Dix, because I don't know if Dix will return or something, but I definitely feel that Dix is going to get involved in this, definitely somehow. I don't know how, but what he said definitely foreshadowed what ended up happening. That's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for the second to last classic horror movie review, because there's only 2 more, guys. There's one today and one Thursday, and then I'm done with classic horror movie reviews, but I will see you guys for that in the next video, so see you then. Bye.